Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a seriously important woman-to-woman conversation. We're going to unpack, unlearn, and actively decolonize how we look at intimacy. Let's be real. For way too long, so many of us have inherited this heavy, deep sense of cultural shame around our bodies and our needs. We've been told that marital intimacy is just a chore, a duty, or worse, something fundamentally immodest. But today, we're taking back the narrative. We're reclaiming the absolute spiritual beauty and the profound rights of marital intimacy straight from the actual primary sources of our faith. 8,000. Yep, you heard that right. That is the exact number of nerve endings in a very specific organ in the female body, the clitoris. And what's just mind-blowing about this biology is that its absolute sole biological purpose is pleasure. Seriously, it doesn't reproduce, it doesn't regulate your survival hormones. Allah, in His infinite wisdom, designed this organ specifically for female enjoyment. He intentionally created our bodies to feel good. And here's a pretty surprising fact to put that into perspective. Men don't even have an exact single-purpose equivalent. Just think about that for a second. We've literally been conditioned to believe our pleasure is secondary, but our very own anatomy is telling us a completely different story. So that brings us to a really crucial question, doesn't it? If Allah intricately designed us for pleasure, where on earth did all this shame come from? Why are we as women constantly told that desiring physical fulfillment somehow makes us less pious? Why are our needs always pushed to the background, hidden away, or just treated as something dirty? Look, if the one who created us made absolutely no mistakes in our physical design, then the shame we're carrying around, it's not divine. It's entirely man-made. And we actually see the real-world danger of that man-made shame right in the data. Globally, up to 7% of women struggle with vaginismus. It's a painful condition that makes intimacy extremely difficult. But here is the truly heartbreaking reality. Because of the intense cultural stigma surrounding sex, these painful realities are often significantly higher in Muslim-majority regions. When we're taught to subconsciously hate intimacy, to view it as inherently immodest, our bodies actually react to that trauma. We literally tense up. So this isn't just some abstract theory. Culturally inherited shame has very real, severe physical consequences for women. I see so many married women who just endure physical and emotional neglect. And why? Because they genuinely believe that suppressing their needs makes them a quote-unquote good or modest wife. They've essentially been taught that a pious woman is a silent woman. But I really need this truth to sink in for you right now. Silence about your God-given rights is not piety. It is just neglect. Enduring intimacy strictly out of duty while feeling completely disconnected from your own body is absolutely not the standard of marriage that was prescribed for us. So where did this toxic mindset even come from? Well, spoiler alert, it didn't come from our faith. It actually came from colonial purity culture. This colonial mindset looked at intimacy as sinful, solely for procreation, and it often framed female pain as a punishment. But when we shift gears and look at the beautiful Islamic reality, we see something entirely different. In early Islamic teachings, intimacy within marriage is actively encouraged. It's viewed as an act of worship. It's literally viewed as charity. We have got to separate the heavy cultural baggage we inherited through colonialism from the actual sex-positive reality of our faith. Let's zoom in a little closer on the history of that colonial baggage. During the Tudor era, the ruling church had these unbelievably restrictive rules. They flat out dictated that intimacy was for procreation only. Oh, and it was completely forbidden on Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays. No way, right? And worst of all, they believed in this idea of the curse of Eve. Basically, the notion that a woman's pain during childbirth or menstruation was a divine punishment for the original sin. Because of this, they wouldn't even allow women to take medication for cramps. Now, in Islam, this concept is absolute blasphemy. We don't carry the original sin, and seeking medication to ease your pain is actively encouraged. Now, let's contrast that historical suppression with a truly beautiful story from the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him. There was this companion named Uthman bin Mazan, and he thought true piety meant fasting all day, praying all night, and just completely avoiding intimacy with his wife, Khala. Understandably, Khala became disheveled and deeply sad. But when the Prophet found out about this, he immediately corrected Uthman's hyper-puritanical mindset. He made it crystal clear that his wife had rights over him, and guess what? After Uthman adjusted his behavior, Khala was later seen practically glowing, described so beautifully as looking fragrant as a bride. The Prophet actively intervened to make sure a woman's physical needs were being met. How amazing is that? The Prophet, peace be upon him, literally had to actively de-jahiliya his companions. Because think about it, they came from a hyper-sexualized society. And as new Muslims, they initially figured they had to become entirely celibate to be pious. But Islam stepped in and gave them a simple, beautiful framework. It's basically a three-step process. Step 1, have a pure intention. Step 2, keep it within the bounds of marriage. And step 3, realize that the act of intimacy itself becomes a profound act of worship. It totally rewires the brain. It takes something society either over-sexualizes or deeply shames and elevates it to a sacred spiritual level. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, modeled this lack of shame absolutely perfectly. Get this. Once he stood up to lead the congregational prayer, but then realized he was actually in a state of janaba, meaning he had been intimate with his wife and hadn't yet taken the ritual bath. Now, he didn't panic, he didn't try to hide it out of some sense of embarrassment. Instead, he calmly told the congregation to wait, went home, took his shower, and then returned to lead the prayer with his hair still dripping wet. He felt absolutely zero shame in showing everyone that he engaged in a completely halal, blessed act. And Allah validates this incredible closeness so beautifully in the Quran. Over in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 187, Allah uses the Arabic word libas to describe spouses. Now, in English, we often just translate this as garment, which, let's be honest, sounds a bit dry and clinical. But the exact choice of the word libas means a garment that wraps around you completely. It's something that protects you, covers your flaws, and is physically intimate right against your bare skin. Allah didn't use the language of a cold legal contract here. He used language that symbolizes absolute physical and emotional safety, total closeness, and literal intimacy. To build on that amazing foundation of ultimate physical and emotional safety, the Quran outlines 3 major marital pillars. You have mawadda, which is deep, lived affection, rahma, which is mercy, and ma'ruf, which basically means living together in goodness and kindness. And here is the absolute key takeaway from this. For over 1,000 years, classical scholars have interpreted these divine commands as a husband's absolute religious obligation to fulfill his wife's emotional and physical needs. Let me repeat that. This isn't some modern, progressive new take. It is deeply rooted in classical Islamic law. Her pleasure and her well-being are literally his religious duty. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, was incredibly explicit about this. He gave a very powerful warning, saying, "Do not approach your wives like an animal." Think about that. Over 1,400 years ago, he mandated proper care. He warned men against rushing into intimacy without foreplay, without affection, and without making absolutely sure that a woman was genuinely, physically, and emotionally ready. He stated so clearly that leaving a wife unfulfilled means a husband is actually falling short of his marital responsibilities. Just imagine hearing this level of emotional intelligence and care being taught 14 centuries ago. It's a total game changer. The early Islamic leaders took this right so seriously that it actually shaped national policy. There's this fascinating story about Umar. When he was the ruler, he was walking at night and happened to overhear a woman reciting a poem. She was lamenting how much she missed her husband, who was away on a military expedition, and she was very openly expressing her physical longing for him. Well, because he overheard this single woman's expression of unfulfilled physical needs, Umar actually consulted his daughter Hafsa and literally changed the military deployment policies of the entire state, just to ensure that husbands came home in time to be intimate with their wives. A woman's pleasure was literally an issue of state importance. So with all of this rich history, why do we feel so shy to talk about this today? The women of the Ansar certainly didn't. The Prophet, peace be upon him, specifically praised the women of the Ansar because they never let their modesty or their haya prevent them from asking bold, direct, and intimate questions about their bodies and their Islamic rights. He didn't shush them. He didn't tell them to act more quote-unquote modest. He actively celebrated their curiosity. Asking questions about your God-given physical rights and seeking out this kind of education is quite literally a sunnah. Which brings us to a major misunderstanding we really have to gently clear up. You know, we so often confuse enduring unfulfilling intimacy in silence with sabr, that beautiful spiritual concept of patience and hardship. But listen, a husband who doesn't know what his wife needs simply because she's never actually communicated it to him, that isn't a hardship. It's just a lack of communication. Sabr is about patience through unavoidable trials. Silently suffering through intimacy when you have the voice and the absolute right to guide your spouse is not sabr. It's a situation that requires active communication and resolution, and you absolutely have the right to seek that. So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought. Are you ready to put down the cultural shame and finally claim your God-given rights? If you're married and you've never really communicated your needs, let this explainer be your sign that you are absolutely allowed to. In fact, you have a religious right to. And hey, if you aren't married yet, learn these rights right now so you can enter marriage fully empowered. Remember, your fulfillment, your pleasure, and your bodily autonomy were intentionally designed and protected by Allah. Don't let anyone ever tell you otherwise. Keep asking those bold questions and never, ever stop learning.